Yes, good afternoon and welcome into the Solar Power Hour. I'm your host, David Ringo. Thanks for joining us. Our phone number is 888-337-0937. You can find us on Facebook at the Solar Power Hour or visit us our website at thesolarpowerhour.solar. We're excited to be back this week and talking a little bit more detail about what we did last week. And I won't, if you're from Chicken, Alabama to Last Chance, Colorado, we want to help you make the right choice when you go solar, and we'll put you in the driver's seat. When you have a solar representative come out to you and talk to you at your house about solar and how you can go solar, we want to help you out and make you educated enough to where you ask the right questions and make the right decisions. So some of the things we talked about last week were pretty high level, and we want to get into those a little bit more in depth this week. And I had a couple of people ask me, some of the questions, it didn't make sense to them and why it would make the cost of the system more. And what I want to do is go down through these. And so I have about a dozen items that I want to talk about. These are main points that change the pricing of systems, and you should be aware of these before you have somebody come out. And they're all very topical on pricing, and you can decide these honestly on your own. It's very simple. But one of the first things, like if somebody asks me how much is, listen, I got a 2,400 square foot home, how much does solar cost for it? And there's just no way of telling. And in the second segment today, we're going to talk about sizing and how you size a system and how much you should expect to produce kilowatt hours annually. But let's just talk about the pricing for now. And what we do is some of the questions that every solar contractor should ask you, and they're going to ask you about these. If not, you should be concerned. But the number one thing is, in no particular order, the first one we're going to talk about today is a type of roof. In other words, is it a shingle? Is it a tile? Is it a metal? Is it rolled asphalt? So there's many different types of roofs. The majority of the United States has shingle roofing. So that's honestly the simple, most easy installation you have out there. There's a flashing that they use, and they put flashing right underneath of it, and they actually attach right to your rafters, and it's a very secure installation. It's the simplest, easiest, quickest install. So most people base installs on a single-story shingle roof. If it's going to be a tile roof, there's a huge amount of detail that goes into doing a tile roof. There's still different methods of attaching. There's people that actually go and take the tile out and remove the tile and put a whole other flashing in that's already got a pre-drilled hole and an aluminum flashing, and they mount a base underneath of it. There's all kinds of adhesives, and actually we'll bring those in next week for some displays. But what they do with the tile, it is a lot more cutting tile, removing tile, and so on. So if you have a sizable system, an install will use about 1.75, probably just shy of 2 feet per module. So if you have a 20 module system, you're going to have about 40 feet in your roof to support the racking and so on. So if you have, let's say you have a 20 module system on a tile roof, you're going to have to replace, remove, alter 40 tiles or so. So that's quite a bit of work, and it doesn't seem like it, but some of the details they have to do, like I said, they take them out, they core drill them sometimes to do replacements and so on. So tile is extremely expensive. I see average nationally about 20-cent average to upcharge that per watt. So let's just say you're paying $3 a watt for a solar system in New Jersey. That's actually a low price in the Northeast, but say you're paying $3 somewhere. You're going to be paying $3.20 on the average for a good tile installation. And what you need to do is make certain you ask them, how are you attaching to my tile roof? Because some people don't even think to ask that question. You really need to know how they're doing it. Make certain that the product is something that is guaranteed. Ask them what their guarantee is on the tile and how they're going to make sure it doesn't leak. I've used many different products over the years. I prefer the tile replacements. Some people don't like them because, there's different reasons for it, but I just prefer them because it's a lot cleaner look. So it is a galvanized aluminum type look, replacing the tile, but it's just the easiest, the most waterproof system that I've seen out there. So that's what we prefer. But again, that's just the tile. There's preferences. There's different preferences people use out there. But anyway, you start talking about a metal roof. If you've got a metal roof on your house, everybody thinks that's the best roof to have out there, and typically it is. There's several different types of roofing out there, or metal roofs out there. The standing seam roofs, you have corrugated roofs, you have other flat style metal roofs, but the way you attach to roofs typically are a lot easier on the metal, are a lot easier than the shingle and tile. And if it's a standing seam roof or a tile roof or standing seam metal roof, it's a lot easier and quicker to install. It's actually cheaper to install than most shingle roofs. You don't see a lot of people giving a discount for a metal roof though. So what you'll see is you can see 0 penetrations in the metal. There's actually a clamp that goes on the metal portions of it, and it goes. You can actually bolt it right on without making any penetrations in the roof. So a lot of those actually are super easy. So your metal roof, like I said, you can have a metal roof where there's no penetrations. Now, if you have a corrugated panel that's like you would use on a barn, a lot of people use those on their home, on their roof. And there's an attachment that goes on top that actually screws into the top of the ribs. It doesn't go on the flat part, and it's very good about not leaking as well because it's on the top of the ribs. So just that conversation alone is a huge deal on deciding how much a solar system is going to cost. How are we going to attach to your roof, and what is it? If it's a shingle roof, if it's a tile roof, metal roof, a rolled roof. Rolled roofing, if it's a flat roof and it's a rolled asphalt shingle roof, it can be a very difficult install because you potentially have water standing on that roof. So we've done a lot of historical homes in the areas we're in, and there's a lot of the historical homes have a flat roof on them, and then they have gutters that come off the side. It's kind of wild how they do it, but they're very, very low slope and or no slope roofs on these houses. So you have to have something that is absolutely not going to leak, and they usually build up a curb system. So what they'll do is build up a curb around that, fill it in with some epoxy, and do that as well. That gets extremely expensive. The epoxy itself, the process, and the curb, that all gets very, very expensive. So flat roofs, believe it or not, and tile are your 2 most expensive roofs. Shingle and metal are usually pretty inexpensive. So question 1, what type of roof do you have? If you have a shingle roof or a metal roof, that's usually a very inexpensive roof to install, and tile is going to be outlandishly expensive. And another question that most people don't even think about is how many stories do you have on your house? What floor are we going to be mounting this roof on, or this solar on? And a lot of people don't realize, but you go to 2nd, 3rd, 4th floor on a house, that's going to be excessively expensive to get up there. Not only is it hard to get people up the 3rd floor, 2nd floor, 4th floor if it is. We're going to be doing a 4th floor install this week, and they actually have an elevator in the house. So the beautiful part is we'll be able to put modules in the elevator, go up to the balcony, have a single step ladder that goes up on the 4th story of this condo, and we put the modules up there. Not everybody has an elevator that's got a 3 and a 4-story home, right? So you have to worry about how are they going to rent equipment? Do they have a ladder that's 3 stories, or do they get a scissor lift? What are they going to do to get the equipment and the people up there? That can be a very expensive item to take care of for the contractor. So in addition to getting the modules and the people up there, something that most people don't even think about is you got to get conduit, and you got to get wiring. You got to get all the electricity you produce on the roof. You have to get down to the main service panel. Usually the main service panel is downstairs. It's not going to be on the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th floor. So you have to get all that conduit. You have to run that through a chase in the house. You have to run it down the outside walls. There's got to be somewhere for that electricity to go. So you have to have conduit wiring. You have to do the labor. Sometimes you'll have to have pull boxes. A pull box is like you can't pull wire through a certain amount of 90s and too long of a conduit. So they'll have pull boxes. They pull it to this point and pull all the wire through it, and then they push it through and pull it down there, and then they put a cover over that. So some homes will have pull boxes on the outside. Sometimes they'll have a channel that's very convenient for you to use. Not very common do we go to a 2 or 3 story house that has a very convenient channel that was thinking about solar, because no house built today is really built for the ease and accessibility of installation of solar, except for maybe in the last couple of years. So again, it's difficulty of getting on the roof, the people, getting the labor on the roof, getting materials on the roof, and then getting the conduit and wire downstairs. That is something a lot of people don't have. So those 2 questions are important. Obviously, the number 3, we're going to do an entire episode on this at some point in time, segment on this, is the type of inverter you're going to use. So now we're starting to talk about equipment, obviously. When you start talking about inverters, there's, like I mentioned last week, there's a 100% swing in pricing from the least expensive inverter to the most expensive inverter. And there's pros and cons to every single inverter out there. I've used inverters in the past that are string inverters. String inverters 10, 12 years ago, 15 years ago was the best technology out there. Since then, they've come along. They've had a hybrid of different kind of inverters come along. There's now microinverters out there that are module level inverting, so they invert the DC to AC power right at the module, and those are a little bit more expensive than your string inverters. And there's pros and cons to why you would have a string inverter versus a microinverter versus there's hybrids in between that do a little bit of both. They have something at the module that helps amplify the power, but it's still at DC and it goes to the garage and it still has a main inverter there. So there's many different technologies, and again, we're going to cover that in detail in one of these segments soon. I can't wait on that one. That's in my humble opinion, the inverter is the most important part of the entire solar system. You can talk about a module, but I'll be honest with you, there's 40 to 60 module manufacturers out there that I would put on my house. You're going to pay more for some of the bigger names, but the inverter is really the brains of the system that converts the power to AC, and there's so many different things they can do. The monitoring, we're actually going to cover here in a little bit. I'm going to show you some of the monitoring that they have. And to have module level monitoring, so I can see what a module is producing daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, even lifetime of the system, I can tell what each module is producing and my system's producing holistically. It's fantastic for troubleshooting for contractors, and for the homeowner, it's a way of knowing that I'm getting the production that I was promised when I was sold this system. So you buy a system and they say they're going to produce 15,000 kilowatt hours annually. It'd be really nice to be able to see it, and guess what? You can see that with some of this monitoring that's produced out there now today. So that the inverter, there's many different types, and I won't get into all the names, but next week we'll start talking about some of these inverters and what they look like and what they can do, the benefits they're about. So then we start talking also about modules. You know, I just mentioned it quickly a minute ago, but the different modules, you can have 40 different modules to select from. I don't think any module manufacturers are going to love to hear me say this, but I think a module is a module is a module. As long as you buy a tier 1 module being something that's certified, they pay a little bit extra money to have their module certified, that it's guaranteed and it's produced in a way that it's consistently producing what it says it's going to produce. So if you have a 300 watt module, it's going to produce 300 watts on peak, but we can talk about those in the future. But also, you're paying for brand name a lot of times, so it's no different than the car manufacturers. You're going to pay more for certain names. LG has a very popular name out there in the solar. They have a very expensive panel. Panasonic has a very expensive panel. And then you can get into other Trinas, Hanwhas, and all those kind of names that Helenes. People don't know these names. They're not a common name when you're talking in a home. Those modules are less expensive, but have very, very, very few panels that stop producing. We only have one manufacturer that's ever stopped producing. We have about a half a dozen of them, and maybe someday we'll talk about that manufacturer name. I'm not here to throw anybody in the bus, but every panel that we've ever installed, and we've probably gone through containers of probably 8 to 10 different manufacturers, and we try and stick with one as long as we can until they have production issues or can't supply us with modules. And we've never had, other than one manufacturer, have maybe a half a dozen modules that stop working, and that's it. Every other system, it's been an inverter that's quit working or something else. Some wires have come loose over the years, but we've never had modules just quit working. So modules can cost, and I see a lot of people saying, listen, I'm going to move in 3 years. I need to keep the cost down. Give me the cheapest module you can. Oh, there's cheap modules out there, but you want to make certain that you're setting yourself up for success. If you're going to try and sell this house in 5 years, you want to make sure that the modules actually work. So you want to buy something that's going to continue working. Even if you don't know you're going to be in the house for a while, plans change in 2 years. You don't know. You may not be getting that, you may not be moving out as soon as you think you are, or maybe moving sooner. But I always suggest getting at least the middle level pricing modules and above. Don't go cheap on the modules. And we'll talk about that on its own segment coming up soon too. One last thing on this segment, and we'll take a quick break here, is location. We talked about the roof, we talked about where we're putting all this stuff, but you need to talk about where you are in location compared to the contractor. If you are 4 hours away, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours away. Some states people are driving farther than that, and there's not a lot of solar contractors in some states, right? So are you 8 hours away? And listen, if your system stops working on a Saturday, how soon are they going to be there to help fix that? they're not going to be there Monday morning. So, do you need to be in a service queue to get back out and see somebody and have them come out and see you in 2 weeks? Is it going to be, are they 14 minutes away? They can stop by on their way home and fix it. I strongly urge you to look at location and serviceability of your system. How far away are these people going to be? And why does this have anything to do with a cost conversation we're having? If I've got to do a service call that's within an hour away, we charge $279 to get there, and that's a pretty average price if there's not a service warranty on this system. If I'm going 6, 10, 12 hours away, I've had people ask me to install 12 hours away. I can't physically get a truck and some people there to install it without spending 2 nights and getting back just to do the install, let alone servicing it. So I strongly urge you to look at location of the contractor compared to where you are for the install. So it takes a lot of money to get highly skilled technicians sent somewhere to troubleshoot your system. So those are the first 5. What we're going to do is we're going to take a quick break. Thanks for joining us here on the Solar Power Hour. We'll be right back after this.
All right, this week we're going to talk about something exciting as usual.
We always have something exciting.
Yes, we do.
At least it's exciting to us.
But this is a question that comes up.
TV, hey, it's Friday night. We're not here. Yes, we pre-recorded once again because WeBeam TV is working over in Tampa with Danzo Star.
62 Who Knew. I almost said Professional Mortgage Alliance Joe's Bar and Grill, but actually it's our 39th week of 62 Who Knew.
We're at the wonderful steampunk event at the Verizon Event Center here in 2019. I think it's still August, right? Yeah. Woo! Can't remember
To be able to help businesses to do that part of it. But it's just been a couple of years.
Well, and I've taken the business card files from our business cards and changed them.
Entrepreneurs and professionals of Tampa Bay, welcome to your hour for getting the information, the tools, and the connections
Ian
for
Beckles on Radio Influence.
Or you say left-hand white, and then they catch the left-hand white. What it does, it helps you quick with hand-eye coordination. Yeah.
Well, that's kind of...
As your super connector. We want to introduce you to our 50-plus show partners. We got over 80 categories of expert contributor advice here on the Consumer Quarterback Show, and we want to...
That's where we disagree, but that's okay.
I said nonviolent.
That's okay.
Because, we're one of the only states that don't give them back their right. Got Jamie Limbaugh. He is from the Next Step Image. I love that name because you were telling me earlier.
For the type of republic we actually are is actually very correct. Yet politicians and regular people use these words interchangeably, even though technically they are very different.
If you're an overdoer, overachiever, people pleaser, we tend to neglect ourselves. And even as Sisters Connected here, with Women Unscripted, I know.
Welcome back to the Solar Power Hour. My name is David Ringo, your host. And you can call us anytime, 888-337-0937. Leave us a message with any questions, comments, concerns you have. We'd love to have questions to read on the air. This is a fantastic forum for you to ask any questions you have about solar. We look forward to helping you. We really do. Our whole objective here is to put you in the driver's seat. We want you to be prepared for when somebody comes to your house talking to you about solar. you're not just being led around and told what's going on. We need you to have a proper education on solar. I don't know about you, but when I was in school, there was no solar classes, so there's no renewable energy classes when I was in school. And we still use chalkboards when I was in school, so let's not talk about that. But join us. Check out our website. It's thesolarpowerhour.solar. Check us out on Facebook. It's The Solar Power Hour on Facebook. And I want to get right back into some of these questions. And like I said last week, we talked about pricing and how much solar may actually cost, and what are some of the variables that make solar costs so much, and the variation of different pricings, what you'll see. Last week we talked about national average in price per watt in solar nationally is $3.50 a watt. So if you're looking at a 10 kilowatt, national average is about $35,000 for that system. And man, does that scare a lot of people. Don't let that number scare you, because there's a lot of ways that I can show you how that actually saves you money. It doesn't matter where you're at in the United States, I can show you that. So anyway, I want to get back to where some of these costs come from and why they cost so much. But these are 12 points that somebody should, at a minimum, be talking to you about in your house. And we talked just a minute ago about the roof type, how many stories, type of inverters, type of modules, and location being compared to where you are in relation to the contractor. So the next thing I want to talk about is trees. We have a lot of people that we go out and see. In the past, I would go out and see somebody, and I would show up to their house, and I go in, and I'm excited to get there and help somebody go solar, and I go in, and they're the nicest, just the nicest people. They're very interested. They've got the money. You can tell they have the money. They've got the perfect house, the perfect roof, and I get there, and you can't see the house because there's 4 oak trees that completely cover the house. I mean, completely cover it. There's not an ounce of sun hitting that roof. And I go in and I'll talk to them, and this is no exaggeration. You want to make friends with everybody you meet. I go in there. I don't want to waste their time and mine, but compliment the kids in the fridge like you should and all that kind of stuff. Have a quick conversation. I shake their hands and say, guys, it was nice meeting you, but this isn't going to work. And they're like, why? Well, I mean, some people don't realize how important it is that sun has to hit your roof for you to produce power. So trees, there's so much to talk about with trees. I'm not an arborist by any means, but I do know one thing. People hit a certain height and they stop growing, and there's a limit that you're going to grow. Trees always, their entire life, are trying to get taller and taller, and they grow and grow. When you put in a solar system and you've got trees in your yard that are, maybe you have a 2-story roof, a 2-story house, and you got this tree downstairs that's below the gutter line. I'm not too worried about it. That tree's going to continue growing unless you have some kind of dwarf tree that you bought, or a certain tree that only goes 12 feet. If it's an oak tree, you're going to have problems down the road. You're going to have to remove the tree, or you're going to have to trim it often. I've been to some people's houses in a sense where we're just talking about trees, and they've got full coverage on their house. And I wish I was talking about insurance, but I'm talking about trees. And you can't see their house, and they say, well, listen, we're just going to trim them. They're giant oak trees. We don't want to get rid of them, but we'll just trim them. And I've actually talked them out of going solar, because you've got you can trim that tree, and you can trim it and get to where your solar will be producing. But guess what? You're going to be trimming that tree every 2 years, and there's an added cost to that. And I don't know that it's going to counterbalance how much you're saving. So depending on the amount of trees, how much coverage you have on your house, you need to make certain that you don't have an issue. And if you do have shade issues, I've looked at people's houses on Google Earth, and I've seen that there's tons of trees, and I'll call them up and say, listen, I understand you want to talk about solar, but I got to ask you a question. You do realize I got to get sun on your roof, right? And they said, oh, listen, don't look at the Google Maps. I've cut every tree in my front yard. I get full sun exposure. Great, I'll be there in 5 minutes, right? So there's a lot of people that will do that. Some people they live out in the middle of nowhere, and they don't need permits for it. They can cut down whatever trees they want, and they can do that themselves. Some people enjoy doing that. They need the firewood. They're just moving in. They want to clean up the yard to do more things in their yard or whatever. Some people will move the trees on their own. We've also had somebody remove a tree in their yard on a project we were working on, and I get a phone call because the county stopped by asking where the permit was to remove the tree. I don't know what you're talking about. So let me ask you the question: what permit are you talking about? And because these people were removing a tree that was associated to help out the solar, that tree needed to have a permit attached to the solar permit. So we almost got burned on that one pretty bad. I went and told, we went and talked it through. The homeowner agreed that, yeah, I took this upon myself to cut this tree down, and it wasn't behind us, and we weren't paying for it or anything like that. So we got out of it, but there's all kinds of different, I guess more than anything, if you live out in the middle of nowhere and you cut your tree down, it's fine. But if you live in an urban, area or any kind of a city environment, town environment, make certain you don't need a permit. Make certain you're not going to get in trouble cutting those trees down, and get a price on it. Get 2 or 3 different quotes on pricing on taking the trees down. And as always, dealing with any contractor, make certain you ask for insurances, whatever licenses they need. Make sure that you get that, especially with a contractor that's going to be cutting down trees. So trees, it sounds stupid, but that's a big issue when you start talking about it. But the beautiful thing about trees is most loans that you buy solar with, most solar loans will allow you to put tree removal or tree trimming in the loan, and you can actually build that right in. So if you need to remove a tree and it's $1,500 over X amount of years at whatever percentage the loan is, some people say they're just going to go ahead and do that because they have a big enough solar system that it will hide the cost of the tree removal, and it certainly will, because you can save $30, $60, $80, $100,000 on a solar system over the time. So $1,500 to remove a tree that was dying anyway, and having it cleaned up and stump ground up and all that stuff, $1,500 is nothing. But anyway, trees is a big deal. So next I have on here is, this is only for ground mounts, and I didn't talk about that earlier when I was talking about type of roofs, because it's really not type of roof. But if you need a ground mount system, if you can't put it on your roof, and or let's just say the scenario we just had a minute ago where you have these huge oak trees, right? And you don't want to get rid of these oak trees. I'm not going to promote anybody to cut down a beautiful oak tree to put solar on their roof. And if you do, I'd rather you buy from somebody else anyway. So what we typically do is suggest a ground mount. A ground mount is a structure we build up, that we put out in the yard, out in your field. If you've got land and it's able to do that, we've done that multiple times. As a contractor, nobody really gets excited about it because that adds a whole different kind of construction that we're not usually used to. We're used to getting on roofs, mounting to the different types of roofs, like I said, the shingle, metal, tile, the flat rolled, we're used to that. But when we're going to do a ground mount structure, when we're going to go out, we're not the engineers that design that. So what happens is you'll have an engineer come by, but they will engineer the system to where we have to be in the ground so many feet. Usually you have to fill in these posts. A 3-inch galvanized steel is what we're using in the area we're in now. They fill it in with concrete on top of that. There has to be a taller and a lower post so you can actually have a slope towards the south. All the racking has to be assembled. There's a huge amount of construction and you're building a frame. And there's a huge cost to that. So it actually adds to your payback and your ROI on your solar. So if you're putting in a ground mount, it's a great option to have, especially if you have land. If you don't have land, you don't have an option. You just don't have that option. Some people in urban areas will start putting up carports, maybe something over their pool or on the back deck. They'll build a frame to where they can put like 20 modules to shade it a little bit. So that's something that people do. But my whole point about this is if you're doing a ground mount, that's adding an entire structure that's going to cost a lot of money. So just to dig the holes, digging the holes is the easiest thing to train people on, but it still costs a lot of money to do so. You still have to backfill it with concrete and all the construction equipment that has to go along with that. So depending on how far away you are from the ground mount to the electrical system on the house, it could be 20 feet, it could be 30 feet. That's not a big deal. You start talking 100 feet, 200 feet, 300 feet, there's a lot of things that come into play because voltage drop. I don't want to get too technical on this, but voltage drop is something you have to worry about going from the ground mount to the house. There's all kinds of different things. And in addition to that, I think the average I looked, I know what we charge, but I'm looking at trenching cost on the average for solar systems per foot in the country is about $7 per foot. And I've surveyed about 35 different places that charge trenching. You're looking at about $7 a foot for trenching, and what that includes is you're digging a trench, you're putting conduit down, you're putting copper wires through it, you're pulling it through there, you're doing all the labor to pull the wire and all that stuff. Then you have to backfill it. Sometimes you have to have inspections on the trench. You have to show that it's a certain depth. If it's 18 inches, 24 inches, whatever the local codes require, you have to prove that it's that deep. So digging a trench sounds real simple, and it is. But you could be $7 a foot. So again, I'm sure some of you already beat me to the math. If you're 100 feet away, you're talking $700 just to dig that trench and put conduit in. So ground mounts, not only does the structure cost a lot because you're dealing with a lot of heavy steel, you're dealing with equipment, backfilling holes with concrete. It's a design system that you have to design from the ground up. Every solar contractor wants to go put solar on your roof because the platform's already there. They show up and they start installing. When you go to a ground mount, you have to build the structure that you're going to mount on, and it takes at least 2 days. It depends on the how big it is and so on. You're talking about one day of getting everything set in concrete. The next day you go out and finish the frame. Depending on how big the system is, how many people you have on the crew, you can do it in 2 days. Typically we do it in 3. We drill the holes, get the concrete set, build the structure. After that, we're putting the system together. So it's a 3-day system or 3-day process for us, and it doesn't have to be 3 days in a row. It can be broken up a couple different ways. So the ground mount trenching is a huge question they need to ask, and it's going to be obvious when anybody shows up. But if you have the option, I implore you, if you have the option of cutting down a beautiful oak tree or putting up a ground mount, I'd really like to see you put up a ground mount. My advice to you, I've done this many times, we've done a ton of ground mounts, I've gone back through over the years. I'm always curious, people that we've installed years ago, 5, 10 years ago, I go back and ask them, is that ground mount still working for you? Because, we built it to design, we're just wondering how it held up in the wind, we're wondering, are you tired of mowing around it? I'm just curious about all these questions, so I go back and ask them, and every single person that we've done a ground mount for has had a very common theme on a complaint they have about ground mounts. So most ground mounts, the leading edge is maybe 1 to 2 feet off the ground, maybe a little bit less than the height of this table, and the back is about 6, 7 feet. So you can just stand underneath the back edge is about the standard size we have in our area. And every single one of them has complained that they wish they had raised the leading edge up to 6 feet and had the back go to 9 or 10 feet, and then they could have enclosed it and made it a storage shed, parts of the lawnmower underneath of it, had their goats underneath shade, whatever the case may be. But if you're ever going to do a ground mount, just a tip of advice, think about elevating it to almost like a carport size that you can park underneath of and maybe enclose it someday. It could be storage, it could be anything. And if you're going to do that, you might as well put a roof underneath that. Make it a building, make it something that's other than just the solar. And I think that's one huge learning I would have on a ground mount. If you're ever going to do a ground mount, make it to where you can store something in it. Make it a practical building that you can use. It is a very practical device out in your yard producing power, don't get me wrong, but make it to where you can store something in it as well. So that's what I would say about that. Another thing that people are going to ask about are batteries. They say, listen, and for I'd say 75% of the people that ask me about solar, again, if I'm at the grocery store, if I'm taking my kids somewhere, if they see me driving in my truck and they see I'm a solar guy and they got questions, they say, hey man, I got a 2,400 square foot house, how much does it cost, and where do the batteries go, and how do the batteries get included, and do I have solar if I don't have batteries? So batteries, especially on the coastal areas, all up in the East Coast, Florida, Texas, all those areas, a lot of people say, Louisiana, all the areas in the coast, because of the hurricanes and so on, they talk about how important it is to have battery backups. Well, batteries aren't included in any solar system unless you specifically request it. Currently, I'm not saying that's not going to be the thing that changes, because I will say this, in the next few years, the biggest change in solar is going to be the ability to store power. And right now, it's a very costly thing to do. It's very expensive to store energy, no matter how you do it, whether it be with batteries or whatever. But batteries can double the price of a system currently. We've installed some of the priciest batteries out there and tried to justify the cost to the homeowner, and it didn't matter. They wanted to have the batteries. So there's certain people out there that, almost like a novelty, they want to have a Bentley, they want to have a Porsche, they want to have a certain car. Some people want to say, yeah, I got a full battery system, I got a full battery backup, because I live in a state where we may have a hurricane, may have an ice storm, I may lose power, but I have a battery that costs $30,000, and I do have a backup. So I'm not knocking batteries. I think the technology is advancing rapidly. In the next 2-3 years, I think in the industry, that's going to be the biggest change in the industry and the biggest plus. And the price is going to go down. They're going to get stronger. And again, we're going to have different batteries representatives coming in here. We're going to interview them, talk to them about their different batteries and so on. But that can double the system cost. All right, so looks like I got one more thing on here that I want to talk about real quick, and that's how many arrays do you actually have on your system. So we talked about all kinds of things, but the arrays that you have, an array is how many modules you have stuck together. You have 2, 3, 4 modules stuck together and you have that much roof space. Then you come over here and you got 8 here, and so you have 12 total. If that's your entire system, that's 2 arrays. If you have 8, 4, 3, 7, 9, you have all these different arrays. An array is just a clump of modules. If you have more than 3 and a contractor isn't talking to you about pricing yet because they're just absorbing a bunch of costs and they're not telling you that each additional array should cost you a couple extra bucks, depending on how they're installing those, they should be costing you extra money. For instance, what we do, what I've always done is we actually penetrate the roof at every array and go through the roof if applicable. If you don't have any attic space or you can't get in there and actually do it, we won't do that. But that avoids putting conduit all over the roof. A lot of contractors will come out, you'll see conduit going from one array to the other array. 2 reasons I don't like that. 2, major reasons. One is it's just the most unsightly thing you can ever see on a roof. It's not a good look. Not being able to see the wires on the roof, not being able to see the rails on the roof is a very attractive installation. Secondly, anything that you put in the sun is going to take a beating. So if you have a conduit on the roof that's got wires in it, that's going to be taking a beating from the sun regardless. It doesn't matter what you're using. The conduit and the wiring itself will take a beating, and at some point in time you're running the risk of having a failure with that product. So that's just like I said, that's a huge situation for me. But anyway, how many arrays you have, we charge a couple extra bucks for each, and maybe 100 or 200 extra bucks on each array, because we go through the roof. The boxes we use to go through there to make sure it's waterproof, we spend a couple extra bucks on those and go right in the roof. Getting the labor into the attic, pulling the wires through the attic, we always do that anyway. But if we're doing 3 or 4, we charge a couple extra bucks because it just makes sense. So anyway, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back after this. This is the Solar Power Hour. Thanks for joining us, and we'll be right back.
All right, this week we're going to talk about something exciting as usual.
We always have something exciting.
Yes, we do.
At least it's exciting to us.
But this is a question that comes up.
TV, hey, it is Friday night. We're not here. Yes, we pre-recorded once again because WeBeam TV is working over in Tampa with Dancing with the Stars.
62 who knew. I almost said Professional Mortgage Alliance Joe's Bar and Grill, but actually it's our 39th week. 62 who knew.
We're at the wonderful steampunk event at the Verizon Event Center here in 2019. I think it's still August, right? Yeah. Woo! Can't remember
Yes.
To be able to help businesses to do that part of it. But it's just been a couple years.
Well, and I've taken the business card files from our business cards and changed them.
Entrepreneurs and professionals of Tampa Bay, welcome to your hour for getting the information, the tools, and the connections
Ian
for
Beckles on Radio Influence.
Or you say left hand white, and then they catch the left hand white. What it does, it helps you quick with hand-eye coordination. Yeah.
Well, that's kind
As your super connector, we want to introduce you to our 50+ show partners. We got over 80 categories of expert contributor advice here on the Consumer Quarterback Show, and we want to.
That's where we disagree, but that's okay.
I said nonviolent.
That's okay.
Because, we're one of the only states that don't give them back their rights. Got Jamie Limbaugh. He is from the Next Step Image. I love that name because you were telling me earlier.
For the type of republic we actually are is actually very correct. Yet politicians and regular people use these words interchangeably, even though technically they are very different.
If you're an overdoer, overachiever, people pleaser, we tend to neglect ourselves. And even as Sisters Connected here, with Women Unscripted, I know
Welcome back to the Solar Power Hour. You can call us at any time on 888-337-0937. Follow us on the Facebook at The Solar Power Hour. Check out our website. It's thesolarpowerhour.solar. And what we're here to do is to educate you so you are not getting educated by the solar contractors. We need you to be able to ask them questions and actually tell them what size system you need, tell them what products you prefer, and ask them the questions that they're going to ask you. We love helping people be in the driver's seat. Essentially, that's our goal here, is to help put you in the driver's seat when you're talking about solar with a contractor. Also, if you would, we have a lot of people asking questions. A couple of people called last week and so on. We're starting to get a little bit more traffic and questions. What I'd like for you to do is, if you can check us out on, or just shoot me an email. My email is Ringo, it's my last name, Ringo, at thesolarpowerhour.solar. If you would do that, shoot me a question. I'll ask it online as long as it makes sense. I'm not going to ask every question online, but on these shows. But yeah, we're looking for questions to ask. Whatever you got questions about. If it's a system you already have, system you were looking at, something you're thinking about buying, I don't care where you're at, what you're doing. I'll do the research and get back to you. We'll put it on the air if it's a good enough question. And always, there's never a bad question unless you ask it 3 times in my book. But anyway, I want to go back to some of the costs that are associated with what makes a system cost so much. Or elevated more so than an average cost. And one of the things we didn't talk about, we are altering the system, your house electrical system when we do this. We're adding breakers to a main service panel. We're infusing solar power into your main service panel. There's all kinds of things that are changing, right? So one of the things we didn't talk about, and there's a lot of complexity that can go into this, there's some very simple additions where you can just literally throw a breaker in a panel box if it's the right size, and the panel box has to be a certain size. If the newer systems obviously are better. We go to a lot of homes that have a 100 amp service. 100 amp service isn't up to code in the areas that we're in, so you have to upgrade it to 150 to 200 watt or 200 amp service, right? One of the things that a lot of people don't realize is if you have to upgrade that system, you're going to have an initial cost associated with that. So I've seen costs anywhere from $1,500 to $4,500 and even above that. And you can get estimates all you want. I've seen estimates as low as $1,100 with a permit to get a new panel in there. Just make sure that's a certified contractor. If you're not going to have the solar contractor do it, I would have obviously an electrical contractor do it. Make sure they pull a permit. Again, make sure they're licensed, insured, get a contract, and get a permit every single time. I don't care what you're doing. If it's guttering, whatever you do, please make sure, cover yourself. So what costs are associated with a main service panel upgrade? Sometimes it's real simple. You can go in there and have a surface mounted panel that you just taken off. You're swapping out a service panel, and it's easy in, easy out. Sometimes they're recessed in the wall, a little more difficult. Sometimes you have to, I've been to a place where we've taken 3 meters on one exterior wall and 3 main service panels and combined all of it into 1 meter and 1 service panel. So when you start talking about 3 meter boxes going into 1 and 3 main service panels going into 1, because it was actually a triplex at one point. So we went in, it was a historical house that had 3 different services on it, had 3 different apartments. They all had different meters and they are all paying their own electric bill. Family moves in, they made it into one giant house the way it originally was set up back in the 1900, 1910 time frame. I can't remember what year it was. 1910 was the house. But anyway, so you had this house that had 3 different utility meters that are going to combine all. You have to go through, you have to pay for all that. That's a lot of stuff that you're dealing with the utilities. Every utility company throughout the country is going to be approach that differently. They're going to have different fees, inspections, and so on to do that. Different applications. So make sure you know your contractor knows what to do. That's a very rare instance, but sometimes you have 2 meters being combined. Sometimes we'll have one on a barn and one on a house, and to combine them, you're paying one fee each month as opposed to the 2. You can save money, and a lot of people will say, well, let's just do that. I challenge you to be careful with that, only because if your meter is so far away and you've got to change it, and they're still going to have electricity run out to the barn or whatever. Paying that, additional, all the expense up front, is it going to save you, is it a $9 connection fee every month? Is it worth $108 a year times 20 years? Just make sure that it washes out and make sure it's worthwhile of what you're doing there. But Main service panel upgrades can cost anywhere from $1,500 to $4,500 nationally, and again, the $4,500 is on the very upper high-end limit of what it should cost. It shouldn't be that much. But again, the different meters you have, if you have a single to double meters and so on. One of the unique situations we see often here is, I talked about ground mounts earlier. So we have multiple ground mounts that we've done, that we've had 1, 2, and I think we've had 3 meters come off of one ground mount. Totally acceptable. If you have a barn and a house that each have a meter, and you're trying to put solar on either one of those, and you're like, I don't want to put it on the roofs of either one of these for a reason. Maybe one's a historical building, maybe one's got a lot of shade. We've put ground mounts in between a barn and a house and run both of them off that ground mount. The inspections are different, and then you break up the strings on the different ground mounts and run them to different meters through, you put one over in the barn, you're still gonna have a meter there and one on the house, but you're still just doing 2 different electrical systems on the same structure, and it'll still be rectangular and beautiful. If you want it to be, you can make it any arrangement you can. Usually they're 4 high, and something divisible by 4, so 40 or 24 modules would be a nice even row of 4x6 or 4x10s or whatever. But you can break up those strings within inside that ground mount however you want. You can put 16 over to the barn, and the rest, if it's a 40 panel, the rest of the 24 go to the house. And it's a very clean install, and it powers both the barn and the house. So it's very cool. We've done that multiple times. I think we've done to where we've had 3 systems come off of one ground mount. So they're fantastic, and it's a lot of fun to do the ground mounts when you have different buildings coming off of it. One last thing that's a huge important question is, we've talked about the type of roofs, and we've talked about how high it is off the ground, but one thing we didn't talk about is how old is your roof. So we just talked about a house, just mentioned a house that we did that was 1910 home, right? So the house obviously had multiple new roofs put on. But when you go to a house and somebody says, listen, the system's going to cost you $28,000, and we've done this for years, and what I really urge you to do, and this is a little off in the weeds, but it's pertinent to this conversation, is so you buy a solar system for, let's just say you buy it for $30,000, and you're very excited, you're into the savings, you've decided to take a loan out, you've been approved, you want to do the loan route, you know what the payments are, it's very clear, and again, make certain you understand the loan payments and all that stuff. We'll get into that in much more detail later, but you're approved of this loan, you're all excited. So now comes install day. So what happens is, we've got an installation crew coming up, and there's a box truck shows up, there's another van with electricians, people are jumping out, they're all putting ladders up, they're getting ready to get up there and put the solar system in. You've taken the day off, you've got a vacation day, you didn't really want to burn a vacation day, but you have to because you want to be there for the install, and you want to let them in the garage and all that stuff. And guess what? They get up on the roof, and 3 minutes later they come down and say, well, I don't know how to tell you this, but your roof is in such terrible shape that we can't install on this. So right away, you've got to stop. Everything stops right then and there. The guys in the garage are getting ready to start working on your electrical system, have to stop. The guys on the roof can't do anything. You need to make a decision at that point in time. Is my roof, what am I going to do? They're telling you it's too old to install on, so what are your options? Your options are, well, you guys need to leave and come back later and all that stuff. So to avoid that whole scenario, I strongly urge you to have a company that will come out and do an actual inspection. We call it a site survey. There's pre-sites. There's all kinds of different scenarios and different things that people look at. You need to have a company come out and look at your house before they install on it. I've talked for years about having sales guys and site survey guys and installers. There's different people with different skill sets. You can develop those all into one person, but it takes years. It takes years to get a good a representative to understand the pricing and how it's going to save you money and talk you through the financing and the tax credits and all that stuff. That's a highly skilled individual. Another highly skilled individual is the electrician that's going to come out and start working with your electrical unit and change all your electrical circuitry and all the stuff that they're doing. And then you have another person that's used to attaching to a roof and knowing where they're going to put the modules and how the layout's going to be. Yep, it's 5 are going to go on this roof. That's exactly what's going to fit here. 10 are going to fit over here. It's going to be a perfect fit. It's hard to combine all 3 of those people. And my whole point to this is, to have somebody come out and sell you a solar system for, pick a number, $30,000 like we had a minute ago, and for that person to be able to get on the roof and look at it, it's a very rare individual. You don't find somebody that can go out, talk insurance, talk, what you got to do for getting something, a tier 2, that's not even applicable in all states, but if you go over 10,000 watt AC, it's a tier 2, you have to have different insurances. What's the tax incentives? What are the incentives nationally? What are the incentives locally? What happens? What's the time frame? All that stuff is one strong person that's representing the sales organization that's selling you the system. They can't get on the roof. What if it's dark? What if it's raining when they're there? They're not going to get on the roof. I strongly urge you to have somebody come out there. We do it every single time we sell a system. We have somebody go out there and put, we call it boots on the roof. You want to get somebody that physically gets up there and makes sure that your roof's not going to collapse when we get on it and to install it. You get up there, they inspect it, they look through and make sure the shingles aren't shot. They want to make sure that the system actually fits exactly how it's going to. They measure, they look. We actually have a device that costs more than a couple of my first cars. We have a device that's several $1,000s that we set on a roof, and it'll tell us what the shade's going to be, what kind of implications you're going to have with shade issues. It sits down, it tells you the angle of the roof, it tells you the azimuth, which is a very important factor when you start talking about how much production you're going to get and all that kind of stuff. So it measures shade issues. So if you actually have trees in your yard, it's going to measure how much shade, and it's going to tell you how much of sunlight you're going to see annually. It'll tell you each season, and it'll tell you average. So it'll tell you, for instance, 85%, you're going to get 85% sun annually because of the shade. Shade may not be something that's going to change a lot. It could be your neighbor's house that's shading your house. It may not be a tree. It may be a building. It may be your barn. It may be a baseball stadium right next door. It may be a high school, library, whatever. So if it's not going to move, that number is pretty static. If it's going to be 78%, you can say, listen, I told you we're going to save $10,000. If we install a system without shade, it's going to be $10,000. It says 78. You can be roughly around 7,800 kilowatts you're going to produce, right? If it's a tree that's shading that much, you got big problems because you don't know how much it's going to grow. You don't know, like I said, we talked about that earlier. So have somebody come out and do a pre-site. Look at your roof, and let's talk about how much it's going to cost to remove that roof, or remove and replace your roof, because you need to get a new roof before you do this. We came out 2 years ago with a 25-year penetration warranty. So we're talking about whatever we touched and installed on, we guaranteed for 25 years that it's not going to leak. If it does, it's on us. The only caveat, there's no fine print, but the only caveat to that entire contract was your roof has to be under warranty. I can't go out and install on a shingle roof that the shingles I can see through and I can see the plywood underneath of it, and you want me to install and make sure that it doesn't leak. That's not going to happen. If your roof is under warranty, we have a 25-year warranty, and that's not uncommon to see now, which I think is great. So anyway, have somebody come out and do a pre-site, make sure that your roof is going to be good. I want to give you one quick story, and we're going to wrap up here, but as I was preparing this stuff for today, I actually got a phone call. Somebody actually called me up out of the blue, and I was trying to get this ready, and he says, listen, you come highly recommended, and I wanted to talk to you about something. And I was like, well, this ought to be interesting. Let's see what he's got. He says, I need you to come out and do a removal for me. I got a system on my house now. It's X amount of modules, and I want to have it taken off. I said, well, that's great. It's very expensive to do that. And he says, yeah, I know. He says, the contractor that I purchased from is a national company, and I'm not going to put their name out there. But he says they're a publicly traded solar company. They told him at install, they said, listen, we know your roof's going to need to be replaced in 4 or 5 years. We'll come back out and remove it and reinstall it for $499. We're going to put that in the contract. It's right on here. It's $499. You buy it now, we will come out and remove it and reset it for free, because you're paying the $499. He paid the $499, signed the contract, tells him he needs a new roof. They come out and they said, oh yeah, you need to read the fine print. It says or market value. So they actually gave him a price of $7,000 to do it, and now they've stopped answering his phone calls. Make certain you read the fine print on your contract. This is not a $200 investment. This is tens of thousands of dollars. Read the fine print. I don't care if it's a national company, local, regional, mom and pop shop. There's pros and cons for all of them, and you should make certain you do all your vetting, but make certain you read the fine print as well. That's about it for the show today. We're running out of time, but one thing I want to talk about is I'd like to bring up what we're going to talk about next week. We're going to talk about sizing our systems. We're going to talk about how you know what you're producing after you size it. We're going to try and get to it today, but these questions took a bit longer than I thought. I don't know if we can bring that up. But next week we're going to talk about, this is just one of the slides we're going to go over. This is a great slide. This is PV watts. This is free to everybody. There's many different slides in here we're going to go over. I got this. I'm very excited about going over this. So next week we're going to go over this. We're going to talk about sizing a system, and then once you get a system size, you can do this yourself. You're going to actually size a system before the contractor comes out. I can't wait to see how that works for you guys. It's all free. All these websites I'm going to show you are free. They're so exciting. It's really nice to be able to go out and take your own bill and analyze it and then size the system size. You know exactly what you need. So that's it for this week, but I do want to urge you to get on our website. Again, it's thesolarpowerhour.solar. Email me at ringo@thesolarpowerhour.solar. Ask questions. Give us something to talk about on here. We're talking about a lot of different high-level things. We're going to get into some real details next couple of weeks. Like I said, how to analyze your bill, what size system you need, how to create that system size, we'll know what it is, and how to track it after you're making it, how to make certain that you have the system going, and how to know what you're producing once you get it going. So thanks for joining us. This has been another episode of Solar Power Hour. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great week.